Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated economist here. So, wanted to talk a little bit about the failure of small businesses. And this is something that I feel is probably going to be taking place here going into the next, probably year or two, as the monetary tightening from the Federal Reserve starts to put a damper on the economic activity that is happening out there. Now, really, I'm going to leave a link down in the description for you guys to an article that's coming out of Bloomberg talking about China. And really, if you keep an eye on China, everything seems to take place in China first. Like, they got COVID first, they locked down first, they stimulated their economy, they opened up first, they started having issues with defaulting corporations. They started going back into stimulus first. I mean, everything has taken place in China first, and then it starts spreading throughout the rest of the economies throughout the world. And right now, China is having a hell of a time trying to promote these small mom-and-pop businesses that are taking place out there, because really this is where, like, the real economic activity comes from. It comes from the small business owner. And right now, small businesses are suffering big time. I mean, they have issues just like, we have over here in the United States as far as the inflation that is happening. You got input costs that are moving up. You got labor costs that are having issues. And then on top of all these input and labor costs and products that are going up in price, the economic activity in itself is starting to slow down, meaning that people are just not spending as much money. And if you don't have as many people spending money, then you're not going to profit as much, considering that all the input costs and everything going into the business would require you to have more economic activity in order to make up for that added cost. And that simply just isn't happening right now. And so China is trying to do something about that, and they are trying to condition their economy as far as hitting these bigger corporations and these bigger businesses. They are trying to, like, forcefully get the economy to start promoting more into those small businesses. And again, who knows how successful they'll actually be at this. Now, go and read the article and check it out. I have a feeling that something very similar is going to be happening here in the United States, only it's not going to be done with such force. Like, they're not going to be like... The United States isn't very good at forcing their people to do things. Like, anytime the United States says you're going to have to do this, the people within the United States choose not to, just simply out of spite. Like, even if they thought it was good for them, they still won't do it just because somebody told them they had to. And that is so funny. I love that about the United States. I mean, it's one of the greatest things that we have going on here, is that we're incredibly stubborn when it comes to, like, government authority. But then a lot of people just fall right in line. They're like, yeah, no problem. Anything the government says, I'm totally down for. They are here to protect us. They wouldn't do anything to harm us. Now, there's plenty of people who are like that, but there's more people, I feel, that kind of question government than they really do just fall in line. Now, granted, that being said, after a while, people finally just get frustrated and just kind of follow along with everything. But in China, like, those people will not argue. Like, okay, whatever the government says, we'll do it, because pretty much you'll disappear if you don't fall in line. So when it comes to, like, the way China is going to push this idea out there, is going to be a lot more direct and in their face than it would be here in the United States. But I could only assume that at some point that we are going to see the United States try and promoting the small businesses again here, to try and get people to use those facilities, those restaurants, those small retail shops, those small time services, because that's really where the backbone of America comes from. That's really where the major employer is coming from. That's really where the entrepreneurs of this world, that's where they start. They start at the small businesses, and then they promote themselves and build their businesses and do everything from there. So if you can promote small businesses, if you can get the people to be encouraged to use those particular businesses, you are going to find that you are going to end up with a much stronger economy than if you were to go and just give your money to corporations. Now, I live in a very small community. We have a lot of small businesses here, and I try to stay away from as many corporations as I can, because most of the small businesses that are here, I recognize the owners. Like, I know them personally. So when I spend my money at those stores, I know that the money is somewhat staying here locally and then gets reused here locally and gets used at, for the businesses that are within my community. So anytime that you can use a local business or a small business, you are keeping your money within the community. You are keeping that ability to promote other small businesses within your community simply by just choosing to shop at those places as opposed to corporations. Now, when you do shop at corporations, you are going to save a lot of money, right? I mean, when you have like your idea of going to the big box store, or you can go down to the local mom and pop place, the chances of having a better deal at the big box store seems more likely just because they have this huge purchasing power. But by the time you actually go to those stores, work your way through it, get your items, and get back out to your car, the lack of service and the frustration of being there, it's almost worth it just to spend a few extra dollars to have a good service provided for you, knowing that your money is staying local, knowing that, what you are doing is benefiting the people that are around you. That's the whole point of shopping local as opposed to going through corporations. And you're going to find that small businesses are going to suffer. And as these small businesses suffer, you're going to find more and more corporations filling in the needs of the people who are in those communities as those small businesses get pushed away. So it's very critical, like it's very important and very critical that not only that small businesses are promoted, but then used by the people, so that you don't end up with this like situation that we have where businesses end up just being too big to fail. Because when you run into a recession, these corporations and these major businesses, these big time institutions, they employ so many people that if you let them fail, the downturn to the economy would be too great. So it's almost to the point now that the governments have to bail out these major corporations just simply to keep the employment going, to keep from a failure of the economy happening. But ultimately, the strength would come from the small businesses. If all the people were employed through small businesses as opposed to, major corporations, we would have an economy that would be much more resilient to the downturns of recessions. An individual person can take a much better position and know how to secure and promote everything within their business better than anybody else. And if there is a recession coming, they would know the best way to position themselves in order to protect that business from a recession. When you're relying on corporations, they're reliant on taxpayer bailouts. Unless you have an unusual and exigent circumstance like the pandemic, and then the Federal Reserve and the Treasury can set up a special purpose vehicle and then promote the idea that they're going to be buying corporate debt, which gets the market to go out there and buy the corporate debt instead of the Federal Reserve. Well, then that's a way that you can kind of bail out the corporations without actually having to go to the taxpayers and say, hey, we're going to charge you to do this. All right. Uneducated economist, you guys let me know.